Hello. My name is Dr. Anitra Sloan, at least, that's the name they erased off the record. They said I was unstable. Said I cracked under pressure. Said I didn't belong here. Then one morning, my sister slapped me across the face in front of the entire hospital, and they laughed. 3 minutes later, I made a single phone call. And everything changed. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the corridor, that steady, sterile buzz that usually faded into the background of my mornings. I could still taste burnt coffee from the break room, bitter and thin, the way every new day started at Mercy General. My shoes clicked against the tile, echoing up into the vaulted ceiling where nothing ever changed, except me. I had just finished checking vitals when the sound cut through the air like a whip. A slap. Sharp, clean, undeniable. My head turned before I could stop it. Valora stood inches away, her hands still raised, her manicured nails glinting in the hospital light. "Cheap intern nurse," she spat, her voice bright and cruel. The hallway froze. A young orderly shifted, pretending to check his phone. One of the residents coughed into her sleeve. A patient waiting for discharge looked up, wide-eyed, then back down again. The sting hit a second later, hot against my cheek. My ears rang. I could feel the pulse behind my jaw hammering like a metronome. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They didn't see a doctor being struck. They saw permission to laugh. Valora adjusted her coat as if straightening a metal. "You're lucky they let you mop floors here," she said, tilting her chin toward Dr. Calloway, who stood by the nurse's station, his glasses sliding down his nose. He didn't say a word. Cowardice was his version of policy. I felt the clipboard shaking in my hands. My knuckles had gone white. Somewhere behind me, a monitor beeped in time with my heartbeat, the steady rhythm of compliance. I could taste copper in my mouth, a mix of shock and restraint. If I answered her now, I would become exactly what she called me. So I turned. I walked away, past the snickering voices and the smell of disinfectant. My body moved on instinct, down the narrow staff stairwell where the light flickered and buzzed like a faulty conscience. Each step scraped against concrete. I counted them to keep from shaking. At the landing, I stopped. Pulled my phone from my pocket. One name glowed on the screen, HR Compliance. I had helped her once, 3 years ago, during a long night in surgery when the power went out and we kept a patient alive by flashlight. She owed me nothing, but she never forgot. "This is Dr. Anitra Sloan," I said, my voice low but steady. "Pull incident camera A3 immediately and forward it to the board. Don't delay. No threats. No begging. Just procedure." 3 minutes later, I walked back into the hall. Valora was still holding court near the nurse's station, her smile painted on like armor. Her friends circled close, whispering. Then Calloway's pager vibrated. He looked down, frowned. The color drained from his face. Valora's ID badge beeped twice, then flashed red. The system locked her out. Administrative suspension. The announcement spread down the corridor faster than any rumor ever could. The laughter died. Valora turned toward me, confusion slipping into disbelief. "What did you do?" I met her eyes. "Followed protocol," I said evenly. "You should try it sometime." For a second, all sound vanished. Then the hospital swallowed the silence again, the rolling of gurneys, the hum of machines, the shuffle of sneakers on tile. People moved around us as if nothing had happened, like erasure was routine. In the break room, the mirror above the sink showed a faint handprint across my face. I let the water run until it turned cold. Pink rivulets swirled down the drain, the last trace of her on my skin. I didn't smile. The quiet buzz of the fluorescent light filled the room, sharp and endless. The reflection staring back wasn't someone broken. It was someone awake. The mark was fading, but the crack inside had finally opened wide enough for air. For the first time, I didn't defend myself. I dismantled hers. Behind me, my pager vibrated again, an unknown number. I dried my hands slowly, watching the screen flicker. Her world had just started to tilt. Mine was about to. The screen still pulsed with that number, unknown, unclaimed. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because something deeper than the slap, something older than the sting on my face, was already unfolding inside me. I walked, not toward the nurse's station, not toward my supervisor, but downward, toward the archives where forgotten things go. The stairwell was colder than I remembered. Every step echoed with a faint metallic ring, as if even the building itself had grown tired of holding secrets. My hand tightened around the folder tucked beneath my arm. Inside it, a copy of my personnel file. Not the whole truth, but enough to crack something open. The basement archives were mostly untouched, yellowed binders leaning into each other like tired soldiers, old metal cabinets rusted at the hinges. A motion sensor light flickered overhead, casting jerky shadows across the linoleum floor. The air didn't smell like medicine down here. It smelled like mildew, dust, and history. And mine had been rewritten. I approached a cabinet labeled, Intern Onboarding, 2010 to 2015. My name should have lived somewhere in there. I opened a drawer and found a small fireproof lockbox shoved in the back, marked with a single word, personal. My handwriting. I had nearly forgotten I stored it here. The key was still tucked in the hem of the folder's back pocket. I unlocked it. Inside were old notes, awards, a folded resume and a sealed envelope addressed in careful script. To Dr. Calloway Pierce. From Marjorie Sloan. I stared at the writing longer than I should have. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Still that upright, spaced lettering, like she wanted to appear precise, unshakable. My thumbs slid under the flap. There was only one page. Valora has always had the better temperament for medicine. Anitra is fragile. She means well, but she's not built for pressure. Please consider my concern before she takes on something that might break her. I couldn't feel my legs for a second. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. But at 22, rejection felt like coincidence. Like maybe I just missed the mark. When the Johns Fellowship emailed me a week later with a terse, "We've gone in a different direction," I didn't ask questions. I swallowed it like sour milk and smiled at the person who got the call instead. Valora. The pieces rearranged themselves now, too neatly to ignore. I dug out my laptop. Sat on the floor, knees folded beneath me. Logged into the old database. Searched the published names from that fellowship year. And there it was, her name, right beside a research summary I knew by heart. Systemic resilience under ICU duress. She didn't even bother to change the title. I opened the document, scrolling line by line. By paragraph 3, my own words stared back at me, word for word, comma for comma. The phrasing, the metaphors, the citation order. All mine. She didn't just steal my future. She borrowed my silence to live it. A noise scraped behind me, a janitor cart passing by. I let the laptop fall closed. My hands trembled against my thighs, but I didn't cry. Not here. Not anymore. I stood and returned to the staff break room. Pulled my phone from my coat. Drafted an email to the hospital board. Short. Direct. Evidence attached. But I stopped before pressing send. Because it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about her. About my mother. About all the moments I was made to feel like the lesser name, the second option, the quieter shadow behind the family's perfect daughter. I stared at the draft. Deleted it. Then opened the call log, scrolled to Marjorie Sloan, and hovered over the green button. But my thumb never pressed it. Some wounds don't bleed. They just sit under the skin, quietly shaping everything. I set the letter beside my badge on my desk that evening. The light above my kitchen table flickered once. I didn't move to fix it. I just looked at the two items laid side by side, my mother's quiet betrayal and my earned identity. And still I wasn't screaming. Still I wasn't calling anyone. Still I wasn't crying. Because now I understood, this wasn't the first time they'd erased me. It was just the last time I'd let them. But silence is expensive. And I've stopped offering it for free. 3 days after the fallout, the hospital changed around me, quietly, strategically. No HR meeting. No warning. Just silence that thickened like fog. It began with one missed surgery. A sudden switch in the schedule I hadn't been notified about. Then another. Then another. At first, I thought it was a clerical error. A glitch. Something explainable. But by the 5th time, I stopped looking for reasons. The message was clear. My name vanished from the OR board like a chalk mark wiped clean. I wasn't fired. That would have been too loud, too obvious. No, this was subtler, far more surgical. My caseload thinned to near nothing. The nurses who used to bring me coffee now barely made eye contact. My badge still opened every door, but fewer and fewer people seemed glad to see me walk through them. In a hospital, silence isn't neutral. It's diagnosis. The kind with no test, no chart, just consensus. They called it concern, but it felt like exile. In medicine, we diagnose illness through symptoms, fever, pain, abnormal labs. But in life? In power structures? We diagnose with absence. No updates. No invitations to departmental meetings. No seats saved in the cafeteria. The gossip moved fast, coiling itself like smoke through the hallways and lounges. The word unstable clung to me like a second coat. I didn't need to hear it to feel it. Pity behind smiles. Politeness with an edge of caution. As if my presence might crack glass. And I knew exactly whose fingerprints were on the scalpel that cut me out. Valora wouldn't confront me directly. That wasn't her style. She didn't throw punches, she planted seeds in the right ears. She whispered in meetings I wasn't invited to. She had friends in admin, ties to senior staff, and a smile she weaponized expertly. No official report had come from HR. No calls from Callaway. But my phone did ping. It was from my mother. Family dinner this Saturday. Don't make things harder than they are. Please come. Not we miss you. Not we'd love to see you. Just a veiled warning disguised as an invitation. It read like an obligation. And the event? A birthday. For Valora. Of course. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Reread it until I could recite the tone, the intent, the layers beneath the words. It wasn't a request, it was a command from someone who still believed they had the right to give them. And somehow, even after everything, I went. I stood on the porch for several seconds too long, watching the flickering gold light spill through the blinds and stretch across the steps. Inside, laughter floated through the windows, loud, full, familiar. I knew that laugh. Valora's party voice. The one she used when cameras were around or when people who mattered were listening. She opened the door with a cake knife in hand, arm looped around someone mid-selfie. When she saw me, her expression shifted for a heartbeat, surprise, maybe irritation, but then reset like a snapped rubber band. "Well, look who decided to come back from the dead," she said with a saccharine smile. "Come on in. Mom's been asking if you'd show." I stepped in. The house smelled like roast chicken, vanilla candles, and lemon cleaner. My mother was by the counter, aligning paper napkins like a surgeon prepping for an operation. My father sat in the recliner, half watching a football game, bottle of beer tucked lazily in one hand. They looked the same. They acted the same. But I wasn't. Valora moved easily to the center of the table like royalty assuming her throne. She launched into stories without waiting for questions, her voice loud and effortless. "I told the board I'd help train the new interns," she said, waving her fork like a baton. "Someone has to lead by example." Mom beamed. "To Valora," she said, raising her glass. "The daughter who's always carried this family." I went cold. Carried? My throat tightened. My fork hovered in the air, forgotten. I paid their mortgage when Dad lost his job. I sent money for groceries during the pandemic when no one else would ask. I stayed up 3 nights in a row to wire cash before their lights got shut off. I paid Mom's entire hospital bill when her insurance expired. And Valora carried the family? I didn't say a word. I simply placed my fork down. Not in anger, just surrender. But not the kind they expected. My purse rested quietly against my leg. I reached into it, pulled out a white envelope, and slid it across the table. At first, no one noticed. It stopped next to the birthday cake, blending in among the balloons and glitter. "What's this?" Mom asked, glancing at it. "Read it," I said. She opened it carefully, unfolding the paper like it might shatter. Her eyes flicked across the top line. $50,284.76, paid in full. A full, itemized invoice from her hospital stay. Every scan, every medication, every overnight charge. Paid. By me. There was silence. Even the TV seemed to lower its voice. Valora scoffed. "You're seriously bringing receipts to a birthday dinner?" Mom folded the paper and placed it neatly on the table. Her face didn't shift. "No thank you. No acknowledgement. Nothing." She smoothed a wrinkle in the tablecloth and said in Vietnamese, "Chi con hai sin vi gia din." "Don't make this about you. Your sister sacrificed for this family. Don't center yourself." That phrase felt like a slap, sharper than the real ones from years past. I turned to Dad, searching for something, support, defense, even confusion. But he stared blankly at the television, lost in a world where I didn't exist. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood, picked up my plate, and carried it to the sink. I ran the water. I washed the dish slowly, like I was scrubbing away evidence. I dried it with the towel that read "Family is forever" in embroidered script. And I left. No door slammed. No dramatic speech. No tears. They didn't deserve closure. They deserved what they had always handed me, absence. I walked into the night alone, but lighter. For the first time, I understood. I had never been invisible because they forgot me. I was invisible because they needed me to be. Because noticing me would mean acknowledging what they owed. And acknowledging would require remorse. They were never going to offer it. And I no longer needed it. 3 mornings passed before I managed a full sentence to anyone. Not because I didn't have words, I had too many, too tangled, too sharp. Mercy General didn't feel the same anymore. The air felt thinner, every breath filtered through invisible gauze spun from judgment. There was no formal announcement, no email, no reprimand, just a quiet shift in the way people looked at me. Or rather, didn't. They didn't meet my eyes anymore. They glanced, nodded vaguely, and then quickly busied themselves. Some smiled, but those smiles had no root, they slid off their faces before they could grow. I still arrived at 6:30, as I had every morning for years. My coffee was lukewarm in its paper cup, my badge clipped precisely to my coat, my steps rehearsed and reliable. But routine didn't shield me from erasure. The surgical schedule was tacked to the bulletin board beside the nurse's station like always. Rows of neatly typed names under tomorrow's rotations. My eyes scanned the list once. Then again. My name wasn't there. Not even in the overflow cases, the ones reserved for last-minute emergencies or difficult nights. "Excuse me," I asked the charge nurse, trying to keep my voice even and professional. "Was there a change in today's assignments?" She didn't glance up from her screen. "That case went to Callaway," she murmured, flicking through charts. "Maybe Dr. Lin's team?" "Not sure." A shrug. A dismissive flick of her hand. "You don't need a sledgehammer to break someone. Sometimes all it takes is a shuffled name on a sheet of paper and a shrug." The hallway buzzed with the usual sounds of a hospital, monitors chirping, overhead pages echoing, carts squeaking down tile floors. But underneath, there was another frequency, one I could feel more than hear. The slow, deliberate hum of my removal. Not loud. Not obvious. Just consistent. In the staff lounge, the coffee was burned again. It always was. 2 interns huddled over a laptop in the corner. When I entered, one of them snapped the lid shut so fast it echoed like a slap. Silence lingered too long. I turned to the cabinet, pretending to look for sugar I wouldn't use. She used to scream during rotations, one whispered, voice too low to be heard by anyone else, anyone but me. Like, actually scream. Something's off about her. Always has been. I froze. My fingers clenched the cup harder than necessary. The words weren't directed at me. But they reached me just the same. Then, the door creaked open. Dr. Callaway entered, posture rigid as always, scanning the room like a teacher searching for the unprepared student. His eyes landed on me. "Sloan," he said flatly, "we've been evaluating your recent emotional state. Leadership is concerned you might be overextended. Maybe sit out of high-pressure cases for now." My stomach dropped. My numbers are fine. My outcomes are consistent. "No one's questioning your performance," he replied, adjusting his glasses like punctuation. "But perception matters. And frankly, your colleagues are uncomfortable." Perception. A word used like a scalpel, precise and bloodless. It didn't matter what was real anymore. It mattered what people said. I nodded once. No thanks. No rebuttal. I walked out before the silence in the lounge could close around me like a noose. By late afternoon, the resident office was dim and mostly empty. The window overlooked the parking garage, where red brake lights blinked like warning signs. I sat at the desk, laptop open, pretending to chart something that didn't exist. On the hospital's internal journal feed, a new headline appeared. Pioneering Advances in ICU Resilience, by Dr. Valora Quinn. My pulse quickened. I clicked. There it was, in paragraph 3, my metaphor. My exact phrasing from a research draft I'd written 2 years ago. Systemic resilience under ICU duress. The same structure, same argument, even the same data set. She'd copied it wholesale, swapping my name for hers. Valora didn't innovate. She inherited, plagiarized, polished. And once again, she'd gotten away with it. I stared at the screen so long the words started to blur. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I didn't click away. I didn't even blink. Later that night, I began digging. Into old emails, archived threads, forgotten folders. Somewhere beneath years of resumes, applications, and cover letters, I found one that had been flagged long ago. Sender, Marjorie Sloan. Date, 10 years ago. Subject, concern about applicant stability. I clicked. Anitra struggles with emotional instability. Her sister is more suited for high-pressure work environments. She often withdraws under stress. Signed. Marjorie Sloan, family physician. My mother. Who never held a medical license. Who lied, used a title she never earned, and sabotaged me before I'd even begun. The screen's blue glow lit up my face as if spotlighting a ghost. I wasn't losing because I was unstable. I was losing because someone had told the story first, and everyone else just followed the script. They didn't call me weak because I was. They called me weak so they could feel justified in never seeing my strength. Footsteps passed outside the door. Laughter followed. Then, a pause. My name, spoken, then dropped to a whisper. The laughter returned, quieter, and moved on. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply sat. By the time the night shift took over, my badge hung crooked on my collar. My blouse was wrinkled, and I no longer cared. In the on-call room, a forgotten takeout box sat next to the empty coffee pot, its blinking 12 o'clock as mocking as the whispers outside. I sat on the edge of the cot, laptop in my lap. The hospital's ethics complaint portal was open. The cursor blinked, patient, almost encouraging. I could file a report. I could attach the email. The journal comparison. The rotations list. I could burn it all down with facts. But I hesitated. Because facts weren't always enough. Each word I typed would drag me deeper into a war I hadn't chosen, one I wasn't sure I could win. My reflection stared back at me in the black edge of the screen. The tired eyes. The steady breath. I wasn't angry they lied. I was angry they'd been believed. I was angrier that I let it happen, because somewhere along the way, I stopped fighting. That's where it all started. And where it would finally begin again. The cursor on that portal never stopped blinking in my mind. By morning, I woke to a phone that buzzed with messages I didn't want to read. One of them came from Jalen. The preview line was enough, staying quiet is best, for both of us. I didn't open it. I deleted it before it finished syncing. That was his way, safety over spine. For all his gentle words and clinical calm, he'd always preferred things neat, quiet, untouched. Even when we were together, he'd said, "You make people uncomfortable when you push back." The hallway mirror near my locker caught my reflection as I arrived that morning. The marker someone had scrawled across the metal door hadn't been cleaned off. Mentally unstable. Handle with care. Black ink bled through every attempt I'd made to wipe it away. Even those who said they loved me safest when I stayed voiceless. I pressed my palm against the locker, felt the cool metal beneath my fingers. My pulse steadied. Whatever came next, I was done letting them write the story for me. That afternoon, in the pediatric recovery wing, I heard a child's laughter, a sound too pure for the air that hung thick with antiseptic and exhaustion. I turned. A little girl ran up to Valora, clutching a crayon drawing in her tiny hand. "You saved my daddy," she chirped, cheeks glowing. Her mother followed, smiling. The nurse said it was Dr. Quinn. "Thank you so much." Valora bent gracefully, perfect posture, practiced humility. "I'm glad he's doing better, sweetheart." The child pressed the drawing into her hands, a stick figure family with bright red hearts. I froze. I was only a few steps away. I remembered that man, the one on the table with the collapsed lung, the one whose chart Valora had ignored until I picked up the scan myself. I stayed hours past shift, quietly finishing what she'd left undone. No one saw it. No one knew. Even my victories were safer in someone else's hands. I left before the applause could reach her ears. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, lights dimmed, laptop humming. I logged into my private drive. The folders opened like old wounds, research drafts, call logs, patient files. Each document was another piece of proof that silence had been the currency of this family and this profession. One by one, I began uploading copies to a secure server. The plagiarized research paper. The ethics violations Valora signed off as someone else's. The altered call sheets that had removed my name. And the hospital letterhead my mother had once borrowed to fake authority she never held. Truth doesn't shout. It outlives. I labeled the compressed file carefully, restore_Anitra_Sloan.zip. The name looked sterile on screen, but I felt something under my ribs shift, like air finally reaching an old bruise. I attached it to a message addressed to a contact at the Illinois Medical Ethics Board, a woman I'd met during a volunteer rotation years earlier. We'd worked together through a night when a hurricane cut power to the entire South Wing. I'd helped her steady a patient's heart rate manually until the generators kicked back on. She had said then, "I'll remember you for this." I was counting on it. The cursor hovered over send. My finger rested above the key. For a heartbeat, I thought of what could happen if it reached the wrong person, if Valora's network crushed me before I even had the chance to speak. Then I hit send anyway. The confirmation line blinked once, then vanished. The apartment felt too still. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and somewhere outside, a siren faded down the street. I shut the laptop and sat there with both hands pressed flat against the table. If this breaks me, it breaks me. But I won't bend to survive anymore. I stayed like that for a while, staring at nothing, until I noticed tears slipping down my face, not from sadness, but release. I wiped them quickly, unwilling to give them power. The phone vibrated once more, a flood of unread texts from Valora, Jalen, even my mother. "Call me back. This isn't smart. You're overreacting." I turned the screen face down. I was done letting other people translate my pain for me. The next morning, I would still walk into that building, still wear the same coat, still smile at the patients who didn't know any of this mattered. But under every gesture, there would be a new steadiness, a spine rebuilt from evidence and exhaustion. Even my victories were safer in someone else's hands. That ends now. When I stepped into the hearing room, the silence didn't just greet me, it studied me. The air was heavy, not from heat but from held breath, a collective anticipation that clung like fog to every corner. The chairs were filled, some by colleagues, others by familiar faces who had once called themselves friends, and even more by strangers who came for the spectacle, the whispered gossip, or maybe just curiosity. But it wasn't noise that filled the space. It was expectation. A waiting silence that pulsed with its own quiet pressure. Everyone was waiting for something to break. I chose a seat near the back, not because I wanted to hide, but because I no longer needed center stage to make my presence felt. I had spent too long chasing acknowledgement, trying to prove my worth in rooms where decisions were made before I even spoke. Not today. Today, my truth had already been written, copied, erased, and rewritten again, but this time, by me. My breath came slow, controlled. It wasn't calm exactly. But it was acceptance. The storm had already passed through me, this was just the aftermath. 2 rows behind me sat Dr. Calloway. His tie was slightly askew, his jaw tight, and his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, now darted between his phone screen and the entrance like a man watching for a verdict. I saw the flicker of recognition when he noticed me, but he said nothing. Didn't nod. Didn't blink. Just looked down again. Valora entered not long after. Her heels clicked against the linoleum with theatrical rhythm. Red soles. Red lipstick. A spotless white blouse tucked into a blazer too pristine for anyone expecting to be questioned. She walked in like she was stepping onto a runway, not into a reckoning. She offered a tight smile to the board, then took her seat at the front. She looked like a woman about to win, not one ready to answer for the harm she caused. The board members, 5 in total, sat behind a long oak table. Their nameplates glinted under the sterile light. Files were neatly stacked before each of them, identical blue folders lined up like soldiers. The center board member, a graying man with a tired gaze and precise hands, cleared his throat into the microphone. This hearing has been called to address a set of serious allegations, he began. We've received an anonymous report concerning plagiarism, abuse of hospital systems, patient negligence, and falsification of official records. He reached forward, opening the top folder. My folder. The label on the front, Restore_Anitra_Sloan. He began to read, each word a chisel carving through the wall of silence. First came the research. My research. Entire paragraphs, identical in structure, language, even phrasing, lifted from my unpublished thesis and published under Valora's name in a national medical journal. Then came the surveillance logs, clearly showing gaps during key hours when the ER incident occurred. Footage erased. Logs tampered with. A familiar pattern. Then came the surgical notes. My signature forged. Procedures I was never assigned, never scrubbed in for, yet billed and praised under my name. And last, the letter from Marjorie Sloan, my own aunt, submitted with forged hospital letterhead, falsely claiming I had resigned due to emotional instability. The lies had been so carefully built. But I'd been just as careful dismantling them. No one looked at me. They didn't have to. The weight of the evidence spoke louder than any outburst I could have offered. One board member leaned toward another and whispered, "This is extensive." I didn't move. My hands rested folded in my lap. Warm, not from panic, but restraint. There was no need to scream when the truth was finally speaking on its own. And then the door opened. A man stepped in, limping slightly, hair tied back with a worn elastic band, jacket frayed at the cuffs. His presence was quiet but certain, as if he had been waiting years for this walk. He looked straight ahead and approached the front without invitation. "My name is Elgin Thorne," he said, voice gravelly but clear. "She saved my life." He pulled a phone from his coat pocket and held it up. I wasn't supposed to have this video. But I kept it. I needed to remember. He tapped the screen twice. A shaky video began to play, filmed at night, from the side, clearly on an old phone. The resolution was poor, but the image was undeniable. It was me. Kneeling in the alley, hands covered in blood, applying pressure to Elgin's side. I was speaking softly, my lips moving in a steady rhythm, whispering something to keep him grounded. There were no badges. No backup. Just the two of us. Just a human being trying to keep another alive. I've spent most of my life being ignored, Elgin said, lowering the phone. But she didn't treat me like a case. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't even ask for credit. You weren't there. Valora's face, once practiced and polished, cracked slightly. This is a misunderstanding, she said too quickly. Those documents were given to me. It was a collaboration. That footage, it's irrelevant to the academic claims. Who gave them to you? One board member asked calmly. Her lips parted, then closed. She looked to Calloway. He stared straight ahead. Silence returned, not as tension this time, but as consequence. Then, they turned to me. Dr. Sloan, the chair said. Do you have anything you wish to add? I didn't rise. I didn't fix my posture or clear my throat. I stopped asking to be believed, I said evenly. I started showing what they refused to see. No one applauded. No one gasped. There was no triumphant music or thunderous reckoning. Only stillness. But that stillness was different now. Truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives quietly, undeniable and patient. It doesn't crash through the door. It steps forward. It stands beside you. And it stays. Elgin didn't save me. He reminded them that I existed. And in that moment, being seen was more powerful than any apology. When the hearing emptied, the building returned to its ordinary noises, the squeak of carts, the murmur of hushed conversations, but something had shifted. I walked back into the hospital not as an accused shadow but as someone whose shadow finally had edges. My locker hummed quietly when I slid the door open. An envelope lay on the top shelf, plain, its flap sealed like an accusation. I set it on my palm and felt the weight of paper. No return address. No signature. Just a redacted report folded once, then twice. My name was not on the front. My name would be the point of the story inside. I slit it open and read, line by clinical line, an old mortality report, dates, a patient code, and at the bottom, Dr. Valora Quinn's signature. Someone had chosen that file carefully. Someone wanted a ghost to replace me. It is strange how quiet the world gets when someone tries to drown you with facts rearranged. The corridors seemed fuller, yet lonelier. People smiled as they passed, smiles that were careful, a distance maintained. I folded the paper back into its envelope and slid it into my pocket like a second heartbeat. Outside, a technician joked about lunch. Inside, I catalogued betrayals. I went to find Sarah. She was the one person who had ever looked at me and seen a colleague, not a problem. Her office door was ajar. The nameplate had been peeled away, the brass screws cold and empty. My steps made a sound I had not heard in months, decisive and small. A nurse in reception said, Dr. Sarah was reassigned to administration support in Springfield. Her voice had the unnatural calm of someone telling you about the weather, not about a friend disappearing. There was no handoff, no email of explanation. No one had come to say goodbye. That afternoon I tried her number and it went straight to voicemail. I left a message that sounded like someone else's courage. "If you can, call me," I said. Then I hung up because admitting need felt like weakness I'd never been afforded. Later, through a colleague, I learned the official phrasing: temporary reassignment pending review. Politics dressed up as policy. I loaded my tablet and pulled up the metadata logs I kept like talismans. Camera timestamps, login histories, access ports, lines of cold truth that refused to be polite. When I tapped the file for the patient from the envelope, something clicked. The signature matched the one used on several other documents, but the electronic trail told another story. The file had been uploaded from a terminal logged by Dennis Sloan, my father's username. I drove to his house because when betrayal wears a human face, you look to the family portrait for answers. His living room smelled like old newsprint and coffee gone flat. He watched golf on mute, the screen a pale rectangle of distraction. I set my tablet on his coffee table and slid the log forward, showing him time stamps, IP addresses, the exact lines where the edits appeared. His jaw worked. "I thought I was protecting your mother," he started, voice small and brittle, like someone who had been handed a role he had not auditioned for. "I thought I was doing what was best for the family." "You protected silence," I said. "You didn't protect me. You protected an arrangement." He exhaled a sound that might have been a denial or an apology. For a moment I watched a man choose allegiance to comfort over alliance with truth. It was not dramatic. That was the thing. Betrayal often arrives as small, sensible decisions. Back at the hospital, the Whisper Network did what Whisper Networks do. It sharpened into rumor. Someone left a sticky note on my locker. "Handle with care," it read, as if I were a fragile instrument to be swaddled and set aside. I laughed then, quiet and hollow, because the note was both insult and instruction. I should have been furious. Instead, I catalogued offense for use. Then the internal ethics review reopened. Valora filed a complaint of harassment, and suddenly the system that had once ignored my name convened to investigate me. Calloway, who'd watched the hearing without intervening, took on a neutral posture. Neutrality in someone like him is a slow blade. It cuts by method and appointment. The file for the patient death reappeared in the database, this time with different formatting, with annotations that placed responsibility squarely with me. Whoever created it knew the hospital's templates well enough to make the forgery sing true. I felt the air leave my lungs like someone had read scripture aloud and concluded I was the sinner. I could have panicked. I could have asked for allies. Instead, I moved into the methodical part of fury. I printed my shift logs, smoothed them flat, and lined them up like a timeline of presence and absence. I pulled screenshots of Valora's terminal accesses, the after-hours logins, the sessions that occurred when she was supposedly at home, lipstick on in front of a mirror. I exported system backups that showed deletions and restores. Somewhere deep in the hospital's network, someone had allowed a history to be rewritten in plain sight. The review room smelled of lemon cleaner and stale coffee. Valora sat poised, but there was a new tremor in her smile. She had weaponized quiet before, now she faced the noise of proof. When I presented my folder, I did so with my voice low and my manner steady. "If you're going to rewrite me," I said, "you should have erased the time stamps, too." A clerk who had once laughed in the corridor cleared her throat. People shifted in their seats. Calloway, for the first time in months, looked like a man trying to reconcile what he had watched with what he had not confronted. My father's name appeared in the logs, not as malice, but as a string of choices. The room exhaled, a small collective intake at the edges of exposure. Someone said, "That's damning." Another murmured, "This is deliberate." I did not watch faces. I watched the stack of evidence like a litany fusing into fact. Each document was a stitch, and with each stitch I felt the hem of my life sew itself back together. At the end of the session, Valora's defenses faltered. She made excuses that sounded rehearsed, then brittle. It was meant to be a joint publication, she insisted. We collaborated. Her words sought shelter in plausible deniability, but there was no shelter left standing. I left the room thinking of how shame tastes when served cold, manufactured accusations, slow and clinical. It was not the heat of a single blow. It was the long digestion of reputation softened and served by people whose appetites were for convenience, not for truth. On my way out, the elevator doors closed on a group of residents whispering about careers and rivalries. I stood there with my folder, the paper inside no longer blood but ledger. I thought of Sarah's empty office, of my father's learned silence, of the envelope that had found its way into my locker. I thought of how many small, reasonable choices had stitched me into a corner. They taught me silence was noble. So I used it, to finish what they started. By the next morning, the hospital hallways hummed with a kind of rehearsed normal. Charts clicked, pagers buzzed, and people moved briskly as if pretending the air hadn't changed. But it had. The silence that had once isolated me now seemed to surround someone else. An email appeared in my inbox just after sunrise. It came from the Illinois Medical Board, subject line, formal decision. My thumb hovered above the screen for a long breath before I opened it. The Illinois Medical Board has revoked the license of Dr. Valora Quinn, effective immediately. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. My first reaction wasn't joy. It was stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a long surgery where the patient finally breathes on their own. Within hours, the headlines started circling online. Top hospital figure suspended for ethical violations, plagiarism, and misconduct. Valora's name flashed across screens brighter than mine ever had. Her fame had always been built on noise, TV interviews, magazine features, sound bites about compassion and excellence. Now the same reporters that once wrote her glory paragraphs were carving her downfall sentence by sentence. Her name echoed louder than mine ever did, but for all the wrong reasons. When I clocked out that evening, the city lights felt softer, like they were finally dimmed to my pulse. I drove to my parents' house, the one with the peeling porch rail and wind chimes that always rang off-key. I told myself it was the last time. Mom opened the door before I knocked. She looked smaller, her hair pulled tight, her voice quieter. Dad stood behind her, the TV humming a baseball game no one was watching. Mom didn't ask me inside, she just moved enough to make space. You brought shame to your sister, she whispered. To all of us. I let the words fall between us. She said them like prayer, like ritual, as if repeating it could make it true. No, I said finally. I just stopped letting you rewrite the script. She blinked, confused by the calm in my tone. I reached into my coat pocket and placed the letter of revocation on the kitchen table, right between the fruit bowl and the unopened mail. Read it, I said softly. This isn't gossip. It's fact. Dad looked at the paper, then at me, but said nothing. Mom's eyes darted over the letter, her lips moving without sound. Then she folded it once, neat and careful, and set it aside. You didn't have to humiliate her, she murmured. I didn't, I said. She did that all by herself. There was nothing else to add. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to fill the space where our relationship used to live. I turned, opened the door, and stepped outside into air that smelled of rain and cut grass. I didn't look back. That night, while I sat in my car parked beneath a flickering streetlight, the radio played a news segment about Valora's case. They listed her titles, her awards, her revoked credentials. My phone buzzed, an unknown number again. I didn't answer. Some endings deserve silence. Days passed. Rumors turned into whispers, and whispers into distance. Then one afternoon, curiosity, or closure, pulled me toward the small clinic on the south side where I heard she'd applied for work. The lobby was narrow, the floor linoleum cracked at the edges. Behind the reception desk, a woman flipped through applications. I waited, pretending to read a flyer. Valora's voice reached my ears, soft but firm. I have extensive experience, she said. I can start immediately. The receptionist glanced at the form, frowned, and shook her head. I'm sorry, Dr. Quinn, I mean, Ms. Quinn. We can't take former MDs under investigation. It's policy. There was no anger in Valora's reply. Just the faint rustle of paper as she took back her resume. I understand, she said quietly. She walked out into the sunlight, heels clicking against the sidewalk. Her car was parked 2 blocks down. I watched from the corner as she paused halfway, checking her phone. No messages. No calls. The wind pushed a strand of hair across her face, and for a second, she looked exactly like the sister I remembered at 13, smart, ambitious, certain she would never fall. That certainty was gone now, replaced by something softer. Maybe shame. Maybe exhaustion. A week later, I passed the same clinic again on my way to a patient outreach meeting. The wind carried faint laughter from a crowd nearby. As I got closer, I saw her, Valora, standing by the door, handing out flyers for a local health awareness fair. Her coat was plain gray, no name tag, no stethoscope. She smiled politely at strangers who barely noticed her. I slowed my step but didn't stop. She glanced up at the same moment, recognition flickering in her eyes. We stood maybe 15 feet apart. She didn't speak. Neither did I. For the first time, there was no venom, no pretense of rivalry. Just 2 women who had run out of versions of the truth to sell. She wore shame like a quiet scarf now, still expensive, still hers. I walked past her, the paper flyers rustling faintly behind me. The sun was setting, orange bleeding into gray, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of being compared. I didn't ruin her life. She just couldn't keep it when no one else was holding it for her. 6 months later, the city breathed differently. The air didn't carry whispers anymore, it carried motion. The kind that hummed quietly between stoplights and subway breaks, between strangers who didn't know your story and didn't care to rewrite it for you. I moved through that noise like someone who finally learned how to belong to herself. Mercy West Hospital gleamed newer, cleaner, more deliberate. People nodded when I passed. Not because they knew everything that happened, but because they knew enough. The respect felt quiet, unperformed. I never needed applause, I only needed acknowledgement. My office sat at the end of the main corridor, glass door polished so well I could see the faint outline of the woman I had become. The plaque beside it read, Dr. Anitra Sloan, Director of Medical Ethics and Training. I unlocked the door, stepping into light filtered through thin curtains. The scent of coffee drifted from the mug left half full the night before. On the shelf, between medical journals and ethics binders, sat a framed crayon drawing, a crooked heart, no name, no date. Just color. It was from a child I'd treated months ago. The nurses had said she'd drawn it, for the lady who stayed when everyone else clocked out. Validation that doesn't come from applause lasts longer. I ran my finger along the glass, tracing the uneven lines of that heart, and smiled. My calendar blinked with meetings, lectures, policy reviews, but for once none of it felt like a burden. The rhythm of hospital life beat in its usual chaotic tempo, but the melody was different now, mine. A letter sat open on my desk, the official notice of my appointment. I read the heading again, the ink already soft from too many touchings. Years ago, I'd watched my sister hold a scholarship letter with my work inside it. That day had taught me how easily pride could wear another person's name. Now, the paper in front of me bore mine, and only mine. This time, the letter had my name and no one else's fingerprints. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. People think victory comes with noise, but the truest kind arrives in quiet rooms, carried by ordinary light. On Saturday, I walked to the South Side Clinic. It wasn't a deliberate pilgrimage, but maybe closure never really is. The brick walls were repainted, the sign brighter. Flyers covered the bulletin board inside, free health checks every Tuesday. At the bottom corner, I recognized the handwriting looping through the word community. Valoras. She wasn't outside, not that I expected her to be. But seeing her script made something soften in me. Maybe she was helping now. Maybe that was enough. I stepped back into the street, the wind brushing my hair into my face. A bus rumbled by, spraying dust against my shoes. I kept walking. Each step felt lighter, more certain. The city had a rhythm again, and for once I wasn't walking against it. That evening, I stood on my apartment balcony. The city stretched out in front of me, endless lights and moving pieces, proof that life continues whether we're ready or not. A soft dusk settled over the skyline, tinting everything gold. I poured coffee instead of wine. The bitterness was grounding. A small package sat on the patio table, addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a photograph, framed in simple wood. Elgin Thorne, smiling, alive, his eyes steady. Tucked behind the frame was a note. I keep breathing because you did. The words hit harder than I expected. I pressed the photo to my chest, the evening breeze cooling the tears I didn't try to stop. He didn't owe me. But he remembered me. That's rarer than love. I placed the picture next to the binder labeled Ethics Curriculum Draft, aligning them neatly on the table. Two halves of the same purpose, to teach what silence costs and what truth restores. Turning off the lamp, I glanced once more at the skyline. The city's pulse matched mine, calm, steady, alive. I stepped outside, locking the door behind me. The hallway was quiet except for the hum of someone's TV down the hall. My shoes clicked softly against the floor, each sound deliberate. The elevator ride down felt endless and freeing at the same time. The doors opened to a street alive with people, couples laughing, a vendor closing shop, a child tugging at her mother's sleeve. No one looked twice at me. No one needed to. They thought making me invisible would make me disappear. But I stopped hiding, and now, no one can unsee me again. Sometimes, the most powerful justice doesn't come from shouting, it comes from refusing to disappear. What about you? Have you ever been silenced in your own family, your own workplace? Your own life? Share your story in the comments, because when one voice rises, it gives permission for others to breathe again. And if this story moved you even just a little, subscribe to the channel. There's more truth to tell.